visiting the neighborhood of today's Minneapolis Farmers Market, one might ask why a street named Lakeside Avenue exists when there is no lake in sight. In the late 1880s, this area was the site of a modern, affluent planned community with curving streets, man-made ponds, and a progressive style that we now think of as quintessentially suburban. But by the early 1900s, a group of very different people moved in, people with chickens in their backyards, who sold junk from between their houses, and who observed strange customs, spoke an unfamiliar language, and ate unusual foods. From the early 1900s until the 1940s, the intersection of 6th and Lyndale was the bustling center of Jewish life in Minneapolis, a world of which one finds few reminders today. Who were these people? What type of world did they come from? And more importantly, what type of world did they create? The story of large-scale Jewish immigration in Minneapolis begins in the late 1880s as a settlement of Eastern Europeans on the northwestern edge of downtown. That's where our tour begins, on North Washington Avenue. The Jewish families moving here were part of the wave of Eastern European immigration that took root in both Minneapolis and St. Paul. These people were fleeing violence and persecution and pursuing the dream of passing through the Golden Door to America. This is where they landed, a neighborhood they could afford, a neighborhood that would have them, and one where they could eke out a living as peddlers and shopkeepers. Jews eventually moved the scrapyards from their homes to establish businesses similar to those found in this same neighborhood today. Prosperity came to a number of families in this original neighborhood, seeing the establishment of many Jewish-run stores and businesses. As the Jewish population grew and evolved, its path of migration moved into the neighborhood that skirts downtown along its western edge. This house, still standing on 5th Street just west of 10th Avenue North, gives us an idea of the kinds of single-family homes in which the Jews of the near North Side lived in the early 20th century. And just around the corner, we also find a single tenement building that remains from that era. Looking at this building, one can imagine seeing candles glowing in these very windows and people walking to Shabbat services just 1 block away at the original Mikra Kodesh synagogue. Nearby also stood the original home of Congregation Knesset Israel, established in 1891 at 519 4th Avenue North. This is the building that housed the nascent Talmud Torah of Minneapolis in 4 rooms at the back of the synagogue. Many Jewish homes and institutions were established in this neighborhood as the Jewish migration continued its move toward 6th Avenue and the general location west of today's Minneapolis Farmers Market. Then, like today, it was a neighborhood full of enterprising first-generation immigrants, establishing themselves in a brand new world of opportunity. The grandest of the neighborhood buildings was Knesset Israel's second home, built in 1913 at 6th and Lyndale. This was a magnificent structure that served as a meeting place whenever speakers such as the venerable Zionist Vladimir Jabotinsky came to town. Another synagogue, Shaarei Tzedek, stood at 8th and Bryant. It was known as the Greener Shul because of its distinctive green roof. One of the neighborhood's most popular establishments was operated by the family of Solomon Bruchen. On one side of the store, Bruchen sold volumes of Talmud and other Hebraica. On the other side, one found barrels full of pickles and schmaltz herring. Bruchens also facilitated remittances for those sending money to family back in the old country. In his memoir, noted journalist and Minneapolis North Side native Harrison Salisbury affectionately remembered Bruchens as the Yiddish store, an exotic place of great mystery and influence on his young view of the world. It was a popular meeting place along the avenue of what was once a pedestrian-friendly, small-town streetscape. Another much beloved neighborhood institution was the Sumner branch of the Minneapolis Public Library. Back in the early 1900s, like today, this was a library full of immigrants who impressed the librarian, Ms. Rood, with their dedication to learning and drive to succeed in America. It had many Yiddish books and was open on Sunday for the convenience of its Orthodox patrons. Bassett Place behind the library was the site of Talmud Torah after its move from Knesset Israel in 1910. Eventually, this building became the Phyllis Wheatley Community Center, a place where Jewish and African American kids played together. Talmud Torah also ran a night school for immigrants here and later expanded its offerings to include a swimming pool and social services at its next location on Fremont between 7th and 8th. Also near the library was Sumner Field, a large marshy expanse where Jewish children and other neighbors gathered to play. Across the street from the field was the neighborhood's grade school, Sumner School. In the 1930s, when this area became the Sumner Field housing projects, a quarter of the housing was allotted for Jews. The area has long been a prime location for subsidized housing and has now been redeveloped as Heritage Park. The near North Side was an immigrant neighborhood where Jews and other economically challenged groups lived, worked, played, attended school, and worshiped side by side. Moving further west on Olson Highway, we find the former Labor Lyceum, which today houses La Crèche Center. This was a very important meeting place for socialists of the Workmen's Circle, known in Yiddish as the Arbeiter Ring. This is where they met to discuss and promote the issues that eventually became the platform for the Democratic Farm Labor Party. It was also the site of many clashes between the socialists of the Arbeiter Ring and communists who wanted to take over not only the building, but the organization's treasury as well. As the 20th century progressed and the Jewish community progressed along with it, the second generation of Jews continued to migrate westward along 6th Avenue, heralding the establishment of what was referred to as the New North Side. The neighborhood of the New North Side spread north along beautiful Elwood Avenue. One can imagine the porch lights glowing as children walked home from evening classes at Talmud Torah. The community had become more established, and this was a more affluent neighborhood than the old Home for Children, also known as Oak Park Children's Home. This neighborhood institution was founded in 1918 to provide temporary shelter for children who could not live at home because their families were experiencing hardships. Today, the building remains a shelter for children. Let's now follow Oak Park West down to Logan. Taking a right, we head north on Logan toward Plymouth Avenue. At 12th and Logan once stood the Logan Street Talmud Torah, established as an alternative to the existing Talmud Torah of Minneapolis, when some members of the more Orthodox community took exception to its Zionist teachings. What's more, since the Talmud Torah of Minneapolis taught Hebrew as a modern language and not one used only for prayer, the Orthodox sent their children here to the Logan Street Talmud Torah, which in the 1940s became Torah Academy. A bit further down Logan, we find New Mercy Empowerment Center, originally Gemilas Chesed Synagogue. This synagogue was also home to a loan society that allowed those in need to buy their winter heating coal with no-interest loans. Now let's head one block west to Morgan and 11th, where we find a building that originally housed the synagogue Shaarei Tzedek. The congregation was led for decades by its revered Rabbi Levine, one of the foremost Talmudic scholars to be found anywhere in the region. The congregation's original building was built in 1906 at 8th and Bryant, then moved again in 1936. This is actually its third building, which today houses St. John's Missionary Baptist Church. Heading down Morgan to Oak Park, we take a right turn, which leads us to this magnificent Romanesque Byzantine building that originally housed Congregation Mikra Kodesh. This building dates from about 1925. Looking closely, one sees two surviving cornerstones. One says, oddly enough, Anshe Tzfarad, which means Sephardic men, although the congregation was largely made up of Russians. The Orthodox Mikra Kodesh, originally established as Anshe Russia, drew people away from Knesset Israel with its dynamic rabbi, strong program of youth activities, and central location on the New North Side. Today, this building is the home of Pastor Paul's Food Shelf, a significant neighborhood institution that distributes food to many new arrivals to the United States. Across the street from Mikra Kodesh stands Lincoln Junior High, which was attended by virtually all of the neighborhood's Jewish students. The building still exists today as Lincoln Elementary and features a new playground funded by former students. Moving further north along Penn Avenue, one approaches the intersection of Penn and Plymouth. On the northwest quadrant of this intersection, one finds the former location of Bethel Synagogue, which stood on what is today the parking lot of Pilot City Health Center. Bethel was an offshoot of Talmud Torah, established in 1921 as the conservative Young People's Synagogue. The building was dedicated in 1926, designed by architects Liebenberg and Kaplan, the firm that also designed Temple Israel and Adath Yeshurun synagogues on the south side of town. Bethel recruited David Aronson, a young rabbi serving in Duluth who, due to his moral influence and alliance with another powerful religious figure, Father John Dunphy of nearby Ascension Parish, became affectionately referred to as the Pope of Penn Avenue. Although it's hard to visualize today, this intersection was once the vibrant heart of the New North Side. Particularly in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, Plymouth Avenue from Fremont to Penn was full of businesses, delis, barbershops, clothing stores, gathering places, and gambling parlors. People could, of course, go downtown on the streetcar, but nobody really needed to go there because everything they needed, from a fresh loaf of rye bread to a $1 million haircut, could be found along Plymouth Avenue. By the 1950s, however, businesses did suffer. The Homewood Theater closed because of competition from television, and smaller merchants were fighting the trend toward suburban shopping malls. Far more tragic, however, were 2 summers of urban rioting that hit Plymouth Avenue in 1966 and 67. The riots expedited the movement of North Side Jews out to the city's western suburbs, already in motion due to the post-World War II housing boom and the elimination of restrictive housing covenants that had banned Jews from some neighborhoods. As one heads east down Plymouth, it's hard to imagine the lively commerce that once lined this avenue as the streetcars attempted to make their way downtown amid the double and triple parked cars of shoppers busily preparing for the Sabbath. Turning left on James, we come to the neighborhood's beloved North High School, home to many proud generations of North High Polars. The building has undergone great change over the years, but the proud legacy of the Polars runs deeply throughout this neighborhood. Turning left on 14th and then right on Logan, we come to North Commons Park, a beautiful urban green space very close to North High School. The park served as a dividing line between the Jewish kids and the other youth who went to parochial school at Ascension. Jews and Catholics often clashed in this park in turf battles, yet the park was also a place where the community came together. Heading west on 16th, we cross Penn and find another well-remembered neighborhood institution, Willard Elementary School. And across from Willard School stands the last in the succession of Tomatora buildings on the city's north side, the George Gordon Building, named for the organization's founder.